we'll get started. So, okay, backtracking a little bit. So, today's session for Priority Matrix is how to be prepared for employee turnover. So, I don't know about you guys, but basically all I see on my LinkedIn these days is people who are either unfortunately getting laid off, which is kind of a whole different story, but more commonly is there's just a lot of job hopping going on right now. And, not to say that is a bad thing at all, but it does leave organizations in a bit of a bind from time to time if they don't have a system to, basically gather information from their employees. And then on the other hand, share it with the new employees that will be brought on. So the purpose of today's webinar is basically how to show you that priority matrix will help you be prepared when there is employee turnover in terms of keeping track of important information, and then how you can, share this with your employees that you will be onboarding. So what is the challenge with turnover? Some of the common challenges that we see for organizations with employee turnover would be product knowledge. Maybe there is an employee who's been working there for quite a while and they know a lot about the product, and they may have a special way of explaining it or selling it or just kind of working through the product itself. And that's stuff that's just kind of learned over time, but definitely important stuff for a new employee to be aware of if they are lucky enough to get that information passed along to them. There's also a lot of information that gets wrapped up with the employee in terms of customer relationships, whether they are working in CS or they are account executives in sales. You know, Whatever it is, any employee who has a relationship with a customer or a user, that's really valuable knowledge that for a lot of organizations, it's just kept in emails. Of course, there are CRMs, but sometimes there's more information that needs to go a little bit deeper than just the information on the current lead or the sales process. And lastly, just kind of general processes and procedures. So any type of streamlined like reviews or reports or anything that kind of helps the business go around on a day-to-day, weekly or quarterly basis. We want that information to be tracked, and we want to be able to share it easily with those new employees who will be coming into the organization. So, with all that being said, I definitely want to mention that we also hosted a webinar earlier this week specifically about onboarding with Priority Matrix. So if you are, experiencing employee turnover as an owner, founder, or maybe just as a manager, and you're looking to, kind of keep your team at the same scale, definitely use this webinar to your advantage. And then also check out the session about employee onboarding because you can use the system for both of those kind of procedures. All right, so what are the challenges that happen, when that information is lost and then you bring on somebody new? So what that can look like is, new employees can definitely be confused. They're nervous. They're not really sure how the product works. And so it's definitely important to set them up with as much valuable information as you can. And as I mentioned, a lot of that information is stored in the headspace of those employees who are involved in the turnover. Management can oftentimes feel like they have to scramble to kind of get everything in place and everything sorted out. And again, that's just it's a big time gap there. And we don't want managers to feel overwhelmed or like they're lost in the process and they just lost a lot of valuable information. And with all of that, productivity can definitely drop if you have to spend time gathering that information, continuously asking somebody to share it with you, things like that. So we don't want you to have any of these challenges, and we want you to be prepared for whenever that turnover happens. So the priority matrix approach is essentially to create a knowledge base so your employers can track, or your employees can track the current stuff they're working on. So the tasks, the priorities, again, that client information, whatever it is. And we also want you to be able to keep track of those previous tasks. So the cool thing about Priority Matrix is when you are finished with a task and you mark it as completed, It's not gone by any means. It's just not visible for you, but there are filters you can use to always go back and view those previous tasks. Priority matrix also allows you to track the day-to-day need to knows in order to be successful in a role. And those are going to be specific projects that you're going to want to set up to track specific pieces of information. Again, whether that information is, how they reach out to customers, how they're doing their email cadences, their marketing approach, tools they're using, things like that. You're definitely going to want to have projects to track all that information. And priority matrix also allows for immediate visibility. So as long as these projects are set up and they have the information in there, those new employees are going to be able to see that immediately. So what are tips for, a successful transfer of this information? Way back when I just was new to the organization, just over 6 years ago, our founder and CEO told me, if it's not in priority matrix, it doesn't exist. And that's it's honestly one of the funniest things when I think back to when I was new to the team, because I thought that was a crazy thing to say. I didn't understand the importance of it at the time. But now I totally understand it in the sense that everything really needs to go into priority matrix to, number one, make sure that you're able to execute it in a timely manner before the deadline approaches. But also for times like this, when there is employee turnover, everything is going to need to be tracked, just simply so the next employee can be successful. And also using project and item tags to group information together is going to be really helpful. And I'm going to show you all of that in the live demo. So right now we're going to transfer into that live demo kind of environment. So any questions you have, this is a great time to ask those. And we will get started with that demo here in just a second. Okay, perfect. So again, if you're looking for more of kind of like a basic intro or more of an advanced intro, we have those recorded on our YouTube channel, so you can totally watch them at your convenience. I'm also hosting 2 more next week, which we definitely suggest that you attend, again, just to kind of get the fundamentals if you haven't seen them already. So the topic for today, again, is focusing on how priority matrix can help you prepare for employee turnover. So it's kind of off the main path of how people use priority matrix, which is for effective communication, collaboration, sharing priorities, and things like that, because that's definitely why most organizations pick up priority matrix in the first place. And then you can kind of think of it on the flip side of that, which is being able to use priority matrix for that knowledge base and the central location to store everything that you're working on. And not only that, but track the important information that somebody else will need to know eventually. So to get started doing this, I would suggest creating a new project. And we'll just start with a blank project. And then let's just say tools. Like I'm an account executive, so we'll just use that as an example. Tools AE use daily. And again, it's going to look a little bit different for everybody how you want to set this up. But the purpose is to basically track all of this in one space so it's easy to read and easy to access for the next person. So the way that I would set this up is creating a project, and there's going to be many projects, but this is the first one I would create just to highlight, hey, what are the tools that I use every day that the next person or new employees will need to be aware of? So we could say, what am I using for email cadences? What am I using to book meetings? What am I using to prospect? And what am I using to, schedule webinars? That's a good one. All right. So, and again, this will look different for everybody, but if I were to do this, this is how I would go about setting that up. And then from here, you can just create, different, we use SalesLoft for our emails. So then you can just create different items to track, how you're doing all of this. So, whatever I would want to put in here, we don't need to make it too specific, but you can just kind of break it down from there. And then this project eventually will be completely full. And you can imagine it being, somebody stepping into your role or bringing on a new teammate and them asking, okay, how do you do all this? What tools are you using? Share this project with them. And then, it's going to pretty much be at least enough to get them up and running, if not, be everything they need to know in order to continue with this process. All right, so let me pause there. Any questions so far about kind of the concept of, using priority matrix for tracking this important information so the next person who comes along will be set up and good to go? All right, so the next thing that I want to show you while I'll open this project back up is imagine you're going through your day to day and you're using priority matrix to track all of your priorities and track what you're working on, share updates with your management, things like that. Well, like I mentioned, the purpose of this is to track those current priorities that you are working on. And after we check these off, I'll just go through and, might as well just mark all of these completed. It's the last webinar for the day, so I don't actually need any of these open anymore. So we'll mark all those off. So at a glance, we would see, okay, it's basically empty, not much going on in here. But if you ever need to go back and see your finished items, all that information is still there for you. So when I think about this in terms of my day to day, I have several projects where I have an item for each person that I work with. Same with our engineers. They have a task for each feature they're working on, every single bug we faced, literally tracking every single movement happening in the company, all falling into different projects. So imagine our engineers all quit, or organization has their marketing leader quit, move on to a different company. Whatever turnover happens, as long as they've been using the system, maybe they don't have a bunch of current priorities that they're working on, but I can guarantee you the new marketing leader that steps into the role, if they have all this information to go back and see how that person was going about their day to day, learn about the processes, the steps they were taking, without having to dig through emails. This is literally so clear cut that it puts them right into the position to get started, get up and running, and not really have to spend too much time, figuring out what was happening before they stepped into that role. So then the last thing that I kind of wanted to touch on today is the concept of using project tags, because tracking this information is not something you're going to be doing every single day. And, it's probably not really going to happen until you know that there is turnover coming, or, maybe you're preparing to onboard somebody else. So we don't necessarily need these projects, visible or, too upfront all the time. So just a really good practice to know about priority matrix is the idea of using project tags. So you can see that here under important emails. I have a couple tags here. I see webinar, intro webinar, quiet time, things like that. IT is a really common tag that I use all the time because I work with a lot of IT departments. But the idea is to group similar projects together. So then when I filter for the tag, I can just go in here, we'll say IT demo. And now we're just viewing those specific projects. So with that being said, what I might suggest doing when you're prepping these projects to track this information, I might just call it KB, and that would stand for knowledge base, or like internal KB, internal knowledge base. And in fact, we have that set up on our side because there has been turnover at our company, not recently, but in the past, 6 years since I've been working here, naturally, there have been employees that come and go. And, when I was new to the organization, having those projects was basically my lifeline. It helped me get set up for success and helped me understand, what tools I need to be aware of, processes that we go through, things like that. So again, we don't need to keep these projects top of mind. And if you filter by modification date, eventually these projects will be at the very bottom. You're never going to see them. They're going to be out of sight, out of mind. However, when that time comes and something happens, you need to see that information, just go to your knowledge base or your KB tag And there you have it. I have one project here because we just use that as the demo, but each department is likely to have several, maybe several dozen, depending on how in depth these projects are. But the idea is basically just to pour out all that information you have stored up there in your brain case that you want somebody else to know when they step into this role. And it's not necessarily just for turnover. If you're just onboarding new employees and you're trying to kind of get them up to speed and ramp them, this is a really great way to do that as well. So that's kind of all that I have for you guys on my side. Again, it's a pretty simple concept and a pretty simple process here. But with this day and age, with the crazy economy, it's definitely something that we all need to keep in mind, and hopefully be prepared for. Marcus, hey there, go ahead and come off mute. Just set you up for that.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I have a question, maybe again silly, I don't know. Don't you need to transfer that to the new person? How
Yeah.
does
So what?
get that? Do you
So
need to involve them first then in the project, bring them up as a follower, or does that the former colleague needs to do that before he leaves or something?
yeah, so that's a good question. So what we would suggest doing is having the employees set up all these projects as they, kind of figure out their day to day and start doing things. And then just simply share that project with a manager whenever whenever you're ready to do that, whether it's right before there's turnover or as you're setting this up, share it with a manager. So if I share this with you, Marcus, and then I leave the company, you will still have access to this project.
Yeah, but
So
you need to do that before. So if the colleague kind of tomorrow doesn't come back for whatever reason and he didn't
mhm.
share, is there a way to get access?
Right. So I mean, technically, if somebody emails us, if a client emails us and says, hey, so and so left the company, we need to see their projects, we can transfer that data to somebody else in the company. So we do have the capabilities to do that. But if you don't want to get us involved, then yes, before that person leaves, they would need to share that project with somebody else on the team.
And could I, if I say, okay, let's say I intend to leave and I would transfer all my knowledge, would it be possible to completely transfer my whole account to someone on the whole instead of every project and every item?
Yeah, so again, we can do that technically on our side. Our engineers are able to make that change for you. So, people do email us from time to time and say, we need to it's called renaming the account. So, Marcus, if you left your company, we could just change your login to be somebody else's. We hardly ever do that just because it's a little bit invasive for the person who left. To
Yeah.
have their account renamed. What we usually do is just have somebody create a new account and then transfer over any data that they might need. And again, we don't really even like to do that too much. We have done it in emergency situations, but for sure the best practice is just to always share projects with at least one or two other people whenever you get them up and running.
And important in this case too, share the whole project and all items, or is it then enough to share the whole project because the whole project shared will give access to all the items, right?
Yeah, so just sharing the project, adding as a project member is good
Mhm.
enough for sure.
I mean, when I look at my priority metrics in the moment, I would say there are felt 500 items is not enough, I guess, that I have in there, right?
Hmm.
The more you work with it, the more items are there. And if I would need to share them all to make sure someone else has it when I leave, oh, wow, that's a lot of work. So, but the projects is not that much. I mean, I guess I have 25 projects or something. So that would be
Yeah,
possible to share that all with one person, and that person could share it then again with the new guy.
exactly. Uh-huh, exactly. Yep, you
But
got it.
there is no renaming, standard renaming. I thought I read that somewhere that I could kind of transfer or change the email. Wasn't there a point that was declared as or depicted as change your email?
Yeah, so you can do that on your side. So let's say, Marcus, you are, let's say the company you work for changes is bought out by somebody else, for example, and then the domain changes, or there's a restructuring and they want to reset up your email. So it's, Marcus K or something instead of Marcus.Keller, whatever the changes, you are able to change your login email. You can definitely do that, but it's different if it's you and then giving it to somebody else entirely. Does that make sense?
But technically, that would be a possibility, right?
Yeah, technically it is possible for sure.
No, instead of changing from Marcus.K, I would change to Hans.Müller, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Then he has it. So that would work.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, that would be possible for sure. But what would happen is there would be confirmation email sent to your email address. So you would have to confirm the change of the email before it could happen. So that previous person would have to still be involved at least a little bit.
Then I'm out and the other is in. If that, okay.
Yep, that's right.
So that is a method, a maybe easier version to transfer all account infos to another person that way.
Yeah, that's definitely one approach you can take.
Good. Thank you. Good. Great.
Yeah. Any other questions that we have here from the session today? And it's always kind of interesting to look at this because, as I mentioned, priority matrix works really well for systems like this. It works really, really well for, just day-to-day priority and task management. And then it also works really well for onboarding. So that's why we get adopted across organizations at such a high scale because, at the end of the day, it's a central system to help you stay connected with your teammates. And that looks a little bit different for every team and every company that uses it. But, ultimately the usability of the app it's fairly simple. It's fairly straightforward. So it's manipulated and flexible enough to be used in a lot of different ways. So if that covers it for questions, we can definitely wrap up the session today. I'll go ahead and stop the recording here, but I'm going to